You are all ready. If we could please stand for the local government prayer and the acknowledgements. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of lands and the community we recognise.
To God, we ask you to bless this council, people of this correct and prosper.
We gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army and Air Force who made the supreme sacrifice in preservation of Australia's freedom and democracy. We also proclaim gratitude to those who returned.
Thank you. Please be seated. Well, good evening to everybody and good evening to those in the gallery. Thank you for making the time to come down and listen to us tonight, and also for those that may be listening at home via our live feed. We have one apology today, and that is Councillor Littley, and have Councillor Mann joining us via Zoom. So welcome, Councillor Mann. If you do need to say something, really make it clear that you want to speak, so that I don't leave you out. Before we do start, I would like to send our condolences to the family of Mitchell Corby, a young Victor Harbour man who fatal crash, traffic accident over this weekend. There's a number of young people and older people in our community that are impacted by his passing, and our thoughts go out to his family and his friends. Can I please remind elected members of their requirements of disclosure in relation to material, actual or perceived conflicts of interest in relation to any items that are on the agenda tonight. The first item on our agenda tonight is item 4.1. It is an adjourned item, Cancer Australia supporting people with the Cancer Grant Initiative. Mike McRae has apparently said that they're looking at other ways of sourcing this, and it's no longer needed. So the council, the recommendation is that we receive and note the adjourned item and take no other action on that item at this stage, and we'll we take any further action. That does somebody able to move that for me? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? In that case, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Item 5.1, the minutes of the previous meeting. Recommendation take as read. Somebody who wants that way. Thank you, Councillor Robertson, and seconded by, thank you, Councillor Hales. Do either of you have any? Does anybody have any questions relating to the that council? Those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. We don't have any deputations. We do have a couple of gallery. Councillor Charles, sorry, Mr. Charles, you have some questions that you wanted to follow up from that responded to you. You are able to ask two questions and ask supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mayor Jenkins. I won't bother to read our conversation over the Sunday afternoon with the questions I asked and that you asked so well for me, answered, raised more questions again. So that's why I've continued with these. If a credit card policy is available, This is directed at the CEO. Question to the CEO. Could you please provide Team Victor a copy? Wish to understand the mechanics and regulations which are in place, how they satisfy community expectations with regard to all credit card purchases. Team Victor believes that all credit card expenditure by the CEO would be approved by the principal member of council. 1. Would you please explain why the principal member of this council is not responsible for expenditure of the CEO in order to maintain a public oversight and to give cards are used? 2. Would you please advise how many professional organisations do you belong to and how many of those organisations do you claim membership, travel, accommodation, food and drink and any other sundry on your council provided credit card, other credit card? Former councillor Peter Charles.
Through the Mayor, Council's policies, procurement policy and our internal control policies are available on Council's website, so to connect there. That has details of our credit card. In regards to your second question, the Mayor actually have, they don't need to be authorised by the principal member, My Credit Card. Elected members don't have any delegated authorisation to authorise payments. That's why we have internal controls and policies. So to ensure we have oversight, the Council has financial management policies and procedures in place, internal controls, which are overseen by our audit committee and our external auditors to ensure we have adherence to those policies. Second question, my employment contract enables me to have professional memberships. I have memberships in accordance with those. I have 2 professional memberships, which is local government professionals and the AICD. If a credit card is the best form of payment to pay for any of the expenses associated with my employment as CEO, then the card is used.
I think that's acceptable. Thank you. That's all the details on that. Could not find the policy.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Mr. Charles.
Could I just complete that? Saying that the reason why this has been brought up is because to have a subservient member of staff crossing off and checking the credit card of the CEO does not seem to be a wise move. Generally, affects an elected member, because when you make a decision here, whether it's a motion or whatever, the council authorises.
Mr. Charles, Peter, thank you. This isn't a time for debate. And as the CEO said, the elected members do not have authority to sign off on organisational monies. Mr. Lauser, you have Steve here? No. No. In that case, there are no further questions from the gallery. There are no petitions. We move to 9.1, the recommendation that Council receive and note the outstanding resolutions report. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, on page 17, near the bottom, there's a South Australian Wales Centre Education Services Partnership. It says here that the contract hasn't been signed yet. My understanding is that it has been signed.
Through the Mayor, if I may, I know I've signed it. I'm not sure whether the other 2 recipients have signed it at this stage. So probably at the time of writing this report, they may not have signed.
Okay.
Are there any other questions or any comments? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Question on the Victor Dragons area where they're going to build their shed to house their boats. One is that has now fallen over. It's not happening at Encounter Oval, apparently. Maya Resort. Also, we have a budget line to support them, so I'm just wondering when that budget line will cease, whether they have to reapply again for another loan, whatever they got.
Perhaps Kathy Hayter.
Thank you, through the Mayor. The Victor Dragons, we have been working with them for quite a while now, trying to find a home for them. We approached the cricket club to have a shed adjacent to the club. Some discussion there and some not general support from Mount Bay Football Club around there because of potential loss of markings. We are still looking at that, but our other alternative now is potentially to put them on a parcel of 202. We're just looking at the practicality, lot 202. Lot 202 now because the state has section for emergency services. The remaining parcel is lot 202, which and so there is potential there for Dragons to have a section of lot 2. The logistics.
Just a clarification, sorry, could you just refresh my memory, lot 202, where is that?
Lot 202 was formerly known as Lot 101, and that's the parcel of land back here behind the TAFE, please. So it was called 101. State carved off a little bit, bigger chunk of it, which is council's.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Mann, have you got any questions or anything you'd like to add? No. Councillor Hales? Do you want to be closing debate? Oh, you've got a question?
It is a question.
Yep.
My question's for Director Hayter in relation to irrigation facility. In relation.
Thank you, through the Mayor. As you know, we now have our new team leader of Environment and Recreation Strategy, who third week, I think, this week. So he has tried to catch up as much on the background. He's already started meeting with those stakeholders. So basketball, athletics, there's a few actually, quite a few, and he's got more planned this week. So he started with the stakeholder consultations and the community consultations. We'll hopefully crack on in 3 weeks. What we are starting to do, that first round of consultation, what we hope to do is have a large gathering, not town hall, but something so that we invite all of the people into the same room at the same time so that we can provide the same messaging about
Are there any further questions in relation to the outstanding resolutions? If those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. We 9.2, the annual business plan mid-year review. And I note that as of the 31st of December, that review came through. There's things since then, but I'd just like to say congratulations to staff for the significant projects that are on track. Just it was a very difficult lack of materials and lack of labour as a result of COVID. So it's and looking so good. The recommendation is that council receive and note this. Someone like to thank you, Councillor. Councillor Robertson. Either of you want to speak to it or have any questions? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Like yourself, I'm not a happy camper at all about this progress update. It's wall to wall, on track, completed. We know that a lot of this stuff is far from being on track. You know, it's really annoying to come across this sort of reporting because it doesn't give us an accurate picture of what's going on. I could run through the ones in here that I've got here, but for instance, the council's, library upgrade is put down as being on track. Cancelled the thing. On
As
track.
Councillor Robertson, as I said, this is from the 31st of December, and I think it was at the last council meeting that the library was put on hold. But as of the 31st of December, that was on track into the tender process. So we need to look at it from.
Possibly, but I mean, that's 2 months ago. And, you know, the 31st of December comes and goes. Then the reports like this one, it's taken 2 months to get onto the council agenda. But I really object to the sort of stuff that's going on here. We have only, in this update here, we have only, there's no objectivity to this.
Can you
It's-
be specific as to
there's-
what questions you have or what the issue is?
Yeah, we have only three levels of status: on track, not on track, or completed. What does on track mean? For me, you know, there should be somewhere near to being, you know, expenditure should be matching the budget. But it's not like that at all. I think we need to really, really improve what's going on here. And this is not an accurate program. For instance, McKinley Street car parking here, talking about it being on track. On track to where? I mean, we don't have, we've cancelled $2 million of budget out of that. And
Well, Councillor Robertson, as you can see with the progress update, it is on track as plans are currently being amended as per the council resolution. So that is currently happening at the moment, and that resolution is on track.
oh, well, I disagree with you, Mayor, but because to me,
Well,
what we need
perhaps
to
I should
know,
ask,
is,
perhaps
we
I
need to
should
know,
ask,
if I could speak, Mayor, what we need to know as elected members, when we're talking about these particular points in time in the year, the halfway mark or where we should be able to quickly glance at and see whether what's happening is likely to end up. Now, we know that there's a great deal of what, especially in the last couple of years, of projects that have come up to be completed in a certain year. If they're not completed in that year, they get dragged off into next year. But, you know, some of the other things in here, we have, you know, our investment attraction and destination marketing project. Where are the timelines to say that whether this is on track or not? There aren't any. This is the same with events and festivals. Here, the stuff is not on the website. And, you know, to me, I find this kind of stuff really annoying to have to read this, because I can tell it's just saying, okay, all these guys want is a bit of green stuff on track. That'll keep them happy. They'll vote for that. Saying, no, I don't think that matches where we are. We've
Councillor
done a
Robertson,
lot
if
of
you've got a
progress.
specific question about where a particular project is, and if you disagree with the project update and the status, perhaps you could ask, and one of the directors or the CEO may be able to assist you to help you. But just saying that you don't like it and you don't agree with something actually isn't being very helpful in terms of clarifying what the issue is. I might ask the CEO to respond to a couple of your questions about what being on track means and some of the other issues that you brought up.
Thank you, through the Mayor. I think, Councillor Robertson, you can't just read this update in isolation to all the other reports that council, that we as administration present to council on updates of each of these items. This is a mid-year review of key planned activities are highlighted in the annual business plan and budget, providing council just with a mid-year update. We provide you with detailed reports and also elected member updates with detail about each of these projects and summaries about where they're going. You also need to look at it in relation to the budget review as well, which is another report coming where we do give you the financials of how we're tracking in terms of budget. So to give, I'm sorry that you don't have any satisfaction in the report that you're being provided with, but that's all it is a mid-year update. It's not the detail of those reports, which we do provide you with, which you have seen for all of the items that Council's currently working on.
Well, with respect, CEO, if this is what we're getting at the end of February, and this is a mid-year update, and for instance, here, the master plan for 44 Adelaide Road, project is expected to commence in February this year. That's month just ending. And it's on track to do that. I don't know that it has, but there's stuff in here which is being reported now, 2 months after the end of the year, which is
As the Mayor outlined, this report was as at the 31st of December. The council has made decisions at its January council meeting. It had a workshop and an audit committee in January as well, which this report was presented to. Hence, it didn't come to the January meeting. Tried to go through to the first. And we are 2 months in since this report was done.
Okay. Well, I wonder at the value of these sort of report. If this is
Well, we're not required to do it. We want to do it so that we can keep members abreast, as we do with all the other updates that we provide you in the elected member update, the council informal briefings and workshops, and the council report. So, and I apologise that it's not to your satisfaction, but it is giving you a snapshot of where we're at.
Are there any further questions?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just a query again. All the items of which it has a February start date or something like that, have they actually taken place? Consultation of employing someone, example for the Bluff Master Plan, is that taken place now? Is that sort of on actually working and running?
Absolutely, that's internally. We're actually doing the Bluff Master Plan. So the
Yep.
officers returned from leave and that is on track. I believe a workshop will be scheduled shortly with members.
Yep. And again, the Master Plan started in February 20. Same with early February 22 with the corporate system review. Tender submissions are due, so have come in.
Tender submissions are in. We have 2 preferred tenders that are currently being assessed by staff. So we have made significant inroads since 31st.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Henderson, did you? In that case, item 9.3, and this is the delegations review. We had the workshop, Councillor Kemp, in January. You might be of these delegations are in line with the changes. Coming up with the Government Act, and we need to go through and enforce them all. So the first recommendation is receiving and noting the delegations. Someone like to? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and that. Councillor Robertson, we're just receiving and noting.
Yes, I just wanted to say the huge amount of work that's been done here by Tyler Walker and I presume other staff as well. And yeah, it's a massive task and appreciate the effort they put in.
Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, just a question, just for clarification, before we go into each of these two decisions. First, the recommendation is the unification of the delegation or the acts, but then in the previous ones following, talks about reinstating delegation to the chair, but only indexes the act. Wondering, are we moving the act, but only reintroducing just appendix act, or we are making reference to clarification?
So it's removing all delegations under those acts. So it's not the whole of the act, certain provisions within those acts, we're removing those delegations and then putting the specific delegations back in as they're detailed in here. Some have changed, so we have to remove all back in again.
Are there any further questions in relation to receiving a plan at all? No, you're good. Those in favour? Against? The recommendation 2, that council hereby revokes the previous delegations to the Chief Executive Officer under the following, and I'll, it's read, are you moving away, Councillor Kemp? I have a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Do either of you have any questions? Does anybody have any questions in relation to recommendation 2? Those in favour? Against? Recommendation that council hereby revokes its previous delegations to the council assessment panel. Take those documents. Somebody that way, Councillor Henderson. And a seconder by Councillor Schofield. Do either of you? Does anyone have any? Those in favour? Against? Recommendation 3, delegations made under the sorry, I beg your pardon. Recommendation 4, delegations made under the Local Act. Take that as read. Councillor Kemp moving that way. And a seconder, Councillor Glasbrook, is that you? Do either of you have any? Does anybody have any questions? Those in favour? Against? Recommendation 5. Someone move recommendation 5. Councillor Hales. Speak to that. Does anybody want to? Favour? Against? 6, delegations made under the Act 2000. Hales and seconded the council. Do either of you? Favour? Against? Station 7. That way. Hales and seconding that. Do you have any questions about 7? Anybody have any questions? Those in favour? Against? Recommendation 8, delegations made under the Support Act. Councillor Henderson, Schofield seconding. Anybody have any? Those in favour? Against? Recommendation 9. Councillor Henderson and seconding Councillor Glasbrook. Anybody have any questions? Those in favour? Against? Recommendation 10, instrument of general approval, delegation to council, dated 22nd of August. That way. Councillor Hales, thank you. Councillor Mann, are you seconding that? Trying to let you feel as though you belong. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Schofield, thank you. You have a question?
Yeah, just a question to the CEO or can answer it. The list of names you got down here, they don't have the same powers of delegation as you, or only certain limits they have to their role.
That's correct, yes.
Any other questions in relation to that? Those in favour? Those against? Thank you. Recommendation 11. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Schofield, Councillor Henderson seconding that. Does anybody have any questions? Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Recommendation 12, delegations made under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Glasbrook. Any questions? No. Those in favour? Those against? Carried, thank you. Recommendation 13. Sorry, this is taking a while, but we do need to go separately. Just need to. So, sorry, recommendation 13, do I have someone to move that? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, seconded by Councillor. Are there any questions? Those in favour? Against? Recommendation 14, delegations under Fire and Emergency Services Act to a fire. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconded by questions in relation to that? Those in favour? Against? Recommendation 15. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Those in favour? Against? Delegations made under Heavy Vehicle National. Recommendation 16. Councillor Hales moving. Councillor Glasbrook seconding. Any questions in relation to that? Those in favour? Against? Thank you. Recommendation 17. Councillor Mann moving that way. Councillor Hales seconding that. Those in favour? It's carried, thank you. Delegations made. Development and Infrastructure Act 2016. Recommendation 18. Moved by Councillor Schofield, seconded by Councillor. Questions? Those in favour? Recommendation 19. By Councillor Hales and seconded by Councillor Glasbrook. Questions? Those in favour? Carried, thank you. Recommendation 20. Moved by Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Henderson. Are there any questions? Those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act 2016. Recommendation 21. That Councillor Hales and seconded by Councillor Mann. Questions? Those in favour? Those against? It's carried, thank you. Recommendation 22 by Councillor Mann, seconded by Councillor Hales. Are there any questions? Favour? Those against? Recommendation 23. Move that way, Councillor Henderson. Thank you. Councillor Mann seconding that. Any questions? Those in favour? Against? Existing and internal, please move. Mann. Recommendation 24. Seconder for that is Councillor Henderson. Any questions? Those in favour? Against? And last but not least, financial expenditure limit, recommendation 25, moved by councillor Mann, seconded by councillor Henderson. Questions in relation to this recommendation? Councillor Kemp?
I'm not supporting this recommendation. I believe the expenditure given to the under the delegation to the CEO is far excessive, more excessive than most areas of other government departments, their CEOs of what they can expend. The CEO has the ability under our annual plan to expend the whole $40 million. And that's what she does, and she does it under the guidance of the chamber. But I think at times there are elements where I think it should come back to chamber discussion and debate on some of this, just not automatically given it to the CEO. Spend, say, $4 million on a road upgrade. For example, I think those types of decisions and expenditure should. That's why I'm not supporting this delegation to this.
Is there any debate or any recommendation 24? Those in favour? Against? To item 9.4, which is the community satisfaction survey. Once again, we've had significant discussions and workshop this Councillor Kemp last week, and the first recommendation is that council receive a note. Somebody would like to. Thank you, Councillor. And does somebody want to second that? Thank you, Councillor Hales. Either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting? Those in favour? Against? And the recommendation is that council endorse the community as presented at attachment A. Hales moving that way. Moving that by Councillor. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of really valuable information out of this. The sorts of questions being answered. Typically in a survey like this, you've got to be able to come up with hypothesis of what you think that's going to come out of the questioning, and to me it's very tricky to see what the hypothesis could be for quite a number of the questions. If the council is desirous of saying, well, to the community, do you think we're doing a good job or not? I'd be the first in line to say that yes, council does do a good job, but I'm not interested in that kind of issue. What I'm interested in is getting information out of surveys like this. It will actually drive us on to improving further and developing the satisfaction within the community beyond where it is now. And even though this says here that it's going to provide benchmarking, I just think that the questions being asked, it's going to be very difficult to pull out of this statistically answers or indications out of this that actually move onward, and especially we could move on with proving where we are. So I won't be voting for it, but I wish it well. Maybe something good will come from it, but I just don't think it has the rigor in the questions and what included in them, the output. Who knows? Maybe.
Councillor Robertson. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I look at this survey questions, look at the title of what it's about. Yes, I did miss the meeting where there was discussions on it. When you're looking at the community satisfaction survey, some of the questions really, sorry, I'll go back one step. For me, a community satisfaction survey is about the performance of council, you know, over the last X years that been here. It's not about the future, what council's got to be doing or anything like that. It's about the history of council. Where can we learn to improve our services from previous experiences that people had with the council? Question there, question 8. You're a City Victor Harbour elected member of council, staff member. Relevant type of question to ask. Will it make any difference?
Could I just answer that? That's so that they can actually, if you are a staff member or elected member, then they would cease the call there because they don't want to hear back from staff members or elected members. So some of those questions are to determine if you fit the criteria to meet the demographic that we're looking for in each of the areas.
Yep, fair enough, thank you. The other one, question 11, talks about future Arts and Culture Centre, Community Sports Association Precinct, and Kingley Car Park, Library redevelopment, multi-purpose voting facilities. I mean, about another half a dozen we could list here as what the community may want, but I don't see how it fits in today. We haven't produced them yet, haven't come along. I don't see relevant those types of questions on those items which are still here.
And going through the Mayor, if I may, they weren't originally in there. That was following the workshop. So there was discussion amongst members about determining or ascertaining from our community some of they are key projects and what the community's priority may well be. So you're correct in that there are many different projects, but as a result of that discussion of that workshop, they were the ones that were gauged that the members were keen to see what the community's appetite was in terms of priorities, but it's not normally what would be in those community satisfaction surveys.
Thank you for that. But again, I think we've done a lot of public consultation on a lot of these subjects already, so I'm not quite sure if it's going to add value to the survey by asking again. But overall, generally, it's not too bad. But again, I'm still not quite sure on the focus of it, whether we get much value out of it and how it will be used, the information, how it will be broken down to not support changes to how council as a whole performs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Glasbrook.
Yes, thank you. And firstly, I think I'd like to thank the council. I think this is a great opportunity and a great idea, and certainly from my point of view, I'm hoping to get some feedback because, you know, it's really important to me what people think. I am a little bit concerned. And secondly, I wanted to say thank you for making some changes from the workshop. I realise there have been some changes made, and I appreciate that. That's good. I'm still a little bit concerned that we're not taking full advantage of this. You know, we're spending the money and putting in the time. It was made fairly clear at the workshop that, you know, the people were concerned at the length of the survey and that they didn't want to, you know, lose people's interest halfway through and whatever else, which I understand is a valid point. But some of these questions, certainly from my perspective, are totally irrelevant to me, and specifically for what I want to find out from our community, trying to make decisions on behalf of our community, such as what is your gender, what is your age group, what town and suburb do you live in, how long have you lived in Victor Harbour, your household structure, your employment status, you know, how long have you been in business, what industry you're in, things like that. Personally, to me, there's so many more things that I would feel that if we've got such a tight little gap that we need to fill with questions, I don't care what the agenda is, to be perfectly honest.
Again, some of those questions, unfortunately, are to ensure that we have a good representation of our community. So if they make the calls and everyone's a female and everyone's aged at 57 and everyone's got their own business in Victor, then we're going to get a very generic response. So they have quotas as to the types of people in age groups and gender and where they're living are spread across Victor to ensure that we've got a good representation. So unfortunately, some of those questions are required to get that good spread of representation of our community.
Well, unfortunately, the people who answer are going to answer whatever their gender is, and we'll have to listen to it. You know, well, it may be skewed somewhat, but anyway, I'm just giving you my opinion. You know, and for me, I mean, there's a little bit in there about the environment, for example, but not very much at all. And I know that's not really. I mean, we could question it in a satisfaction way, but it's coming back to what Councillor Kemp was saying, and that some of these things do look at the future, you know, what your future desires may be. And, you know, what does the community really feel about, for example, the environment? To me, you know, something that's passionate to me is what does the community feel about debt levels? You know, what is our community's feeling about debt and risk? What is our community's thought in relation to population growth, and what do they want our town to look like in the future? I know that this is not a satisfaction question, but it's, you know, it's along the lines of what some of the other questions are within the survey, and it's things that I would certainly find a lot more interesting than finding out what the agenda is. For example, if we're so short on questions, you know, if we've got to be so limited in the number of questions that we can have, I just feel there's so many questions that, you know, we could ask and possibly should ask, would certainly help me out in finding out what our community wants and how can we satisfy them? What do we have to do to satisfy them? So, I don't know, that's just my opinion. I know you put a lot of effort into it, and, you know, I really want it to be successful. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm not sure that it's not going to give us as much information as we could get if we was to, you know, ask a few more questions.
Thank you, Councillor Glassbrook. Is there any further commentary? Councillor Mann.
Jenkins. Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that have been shared around. I think that I appreciate what Councillor Roberts is saying about hard to pull out the specifics and, you know, not potentially the same rigour that survey would, but I think in terms of council and government, it is that slowing piece, and it's something that can be as responsive to changes and surveys and points. I think a more general survey around how has council of the last, that general sense gives us that reassurance that the trajectory that we're sending the plans we're putting in sectoral priority in the community. But I don't have issue necessarily. I think Councillor Glassbrook's concerns about maybe not taking full survey. I think I guess I perceive his issues around moving questions around age and gender in place of more detailed questions to be more about gathering more information, specific information. But I think these generic questions such as age and gender can be really important to include them. For example, age, you want to know what our youth are saying, what our young adults are saying, what our young families are saying, because they are going to be the future of our town, the future of our community. And I think in the past, past generations of Victor Harbor haven't to young people, such as this council is trying to, what our communities are trying to push for. I think it is important that we take those in place in the community. If we want young people to move that lifestyle choice, we need to listen to that emphasis. So I don't have any issues with the survey, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Are there any further comments in relation to the survey? Councillor Hales, did you want to debate the recommendation? Then all those in favour? Those against? Carried, thank you. We now move to item 9.5, which is the 2021-22 December budget review. First recommendation is receiving and noting the report. Moving that way, Councillor Hales, and seconding that, Councillor Robertson. Either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Anybody have any questions? Those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. Second recommendation that council endorses the budget review. Somebody would like to move recommendation 2? Thank you, councillor Robertson. And seconding that? Thank you, councillor Mann. Do either of you want to speak to that, councillor Robertson or Mann? No, councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to say that perhaps out of misfortune in some respects that we've ended up with a very good result so far for the year. $1.5 million of net capital expenditure and a surplus, surplus for the so far, which is always good news. So misfortune because some of the things that we were originally spending 13 million, but we've had to, car park didn't happen, and I think we made a very sensible decision to leave off the highly unfortunate one, but the decision to cut back on the library mezzanine floor. Anyway, so now I think we're at pretty sensible levels of expenditure for going forward for this year, and $66,000, even if it's just $1 surplus, is a
Thank you, councillor Robertson. Are there any further questions in relation to this? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yes, good result when you look at the figures. 66,700 in surplus, 454,000 deficit. Good to do reviews, isn't it? Get this, but raises some questions for me on the depreciation as to the reasons around why the depreciations were dropped, because the projects had to stop. So were they actually cancelled, or the projects being deferred? Because that would play on actually the results and how the depreciation is recorded. So I'm just wondering, that's the first question. The second question is, if that's the case, that we stop these projects, or they've been deferred because we can't complete them, whether it's outsourcing or problems like that, are we pushing our council capability and capacity each year to do these projects, and we keep coming back and stopping them and cancelling them? And if we want to give a good image to our community on our performance, and we just talked about a customer satisfaction survey, then I think they'll be concerned about, you know, this, oh, it's good, we're doing it, but then again, what are those projects that stopped, and how much will that impact the community, and who'll be upset by it? And maybe that should be a question in that survey. So the two questions. One is that these projects that's been stopped, which allowed the depreciation not to be counted now, were they stopped or are being deferred, stopped permanently? The other one is, I can't remember, come back to it in a sec. The other one is about the, that's right, I'll come back to it, come to my. Thanks, Nick, I'll refresh it, but if you could answer that one, please.
Kelly, John, answer it. Some of your answer might be in relation to the significant variances on the bottom of page 56 and on page 57, Councillor Kemp. A major one being the library, council decision not to proceed with the library project at this time because of the blowout of costs in relation to labour. But Kelly, can you expand on that?
Thank you, through the Mayor. So specifically around the depreciation issue, sorry, I can't see you, Councillor Kemp. The issues that we have is that it's an estimate when we originally do the budget, and it's based on a number of items. Around the projects that were uncompleted at the 30th of June 2021, we had envisaged that they would come on financial year for some of those projects. So there is a reduction because the issue for us is depreciation doesn't start until the asset is ready to be capitalised, or it's totally completed and essentially recognised in the asset register. So a number of those projects were uncompleted as at the 30th of June, but then they have come on board essentially September, October, November. So the depreciation was essentially delayed in terms of our actually processing that because the assets weren't completed or recognised as capital.
Thank you. I'll have recalled some other one. On page 61 of the uniform presentation finances, it looks at the interest. It still stays the same from our predicted when we set the budget to it is now under the review. Yet we reduced our capital down, but we actually predicted that we'd be paying this amount of interest on the capital that we approved. Why hasn't the interest rate changed according to the review?
Thank you again through the Mayor. So when we take out new loans, essentially we don't have to make an interest repayment for 6 months after that date. So any of the borrowings that we had forecast for 21-22 would generally be taken out around sort of this period of time. And then the interest would have basically come on in 6 months' time from the date of the drawdown or the settlement. We had already included interest in regards to the $5 million fixed term loan that was taken out late last year, but that was an offset. That was offset by a reduction in the CAD or the cash advanced debenture variable rate interest. So we set that, it didn't change between the two.
Yeah, I appreciate that you're saying that you don't draw down the interest until 6 months later, but the budget is a forecast of what we're going to be doing, for the next 12 months of the annual plan. So if we can forecast this is the interest we've got to do on the borrowings that we may be doing, but when you do a review mid-year, surely you can adjust your interest because we're not going to be borrowing that money, so the interest would drop. You're doing a review process. That's my understanding. The other one is under the library one. 600,000 grant funding is repurposed. Now, that not be a chamber decision, or has that been a chamber decision? Because again, it's outside the annual plan, which the delegation to the CEO is there to deliver that. It's not being delivered now. You've got $600,000, so should that not? It's not delegated to the CEO to do what she wants with it. Surely that should be a chamber decision because it's outside the annual plan.
It will be a chamber decision, but at the moment we're seeking approval from the federal government as to what we can actually use it for. So we did discuss that at the budget workshop. We can't use it for current projects that are in our existing annual business plan or budget. They have to be ones that weren't planned for. So we have selected a number of projects which we gave a list for, and I can email it to you, but the members have received it, and I can run through those. So we are looking at doing Kent Reserve all access paths, ramps, dedicated car park and disability access beach matting, placement of upgrade fire tanks in the rec centre, Maud Street footpath, Hand Street footpath, Waterport Road reconstruction, which has failed, and the Port Elliot Road footpath. Now, these are all projects that are in the future plans. They fit the criteria for the federal government funding. We have issued them to the federal government to say, would they allow them to be used? Because we have to spend the money before 30 June 2022. We identified that we had the resources and capability of delivering these with that funding. We are waiting on the approval. If the federal government approves it, then I will bring it to the chamber to go, are you happy for us to move forward with projects?
And my final question, thank you, Mr. Jenkins, is that this $600,000 we will get approval, hopefully, to spend on other areas, but then when we come to do the library, we won't be able to get grant funding for that again, will we?
Absolutely, because we technically didn't really apply for that funding. It was part of the federal government community infrastructure grants, so we allocated it to that project. So now that you have all your detailed designs and ready to go for the library project, we can and we will apply for other grants with council's approval to subsidise that project.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Robertson, did you want to close the debate in any way? I'll put that recommendation to the floor then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We now move to 10.1, the Youth Development Grants Program. The first recommendation being that Council receive a note. Councillor Hales, thank you, and Councillor Schofield seconding that. Are there any questions in relation to the report? Those in favour? Those against? Carried, thank you. The second recommendation is that Council endorse the Youth Development Grants Program. 21-22 guidelines and application form, which you have in your agenda pack. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Henderson, and seconding that. Thank you, councillor Robertson. Do either of you have any questions in relation to that? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This grant program, $30,000 grant program, is that, does that all have to be spent in this financial year?
Graham, perhaps you,
Through the mayor, no, acquittal by end of the year, I believe, end of 2023, actually. Sorry, Leanne's just at the back, yes, end of 2023. But awarded this year. So awarded under the current budget still.
So that means funds carried over into next year.
Funds are paid before the end of the financial year. The project can be delivered after the end of the financial year.
Okay. I have a question here about some of the guidelines we've got here. Well, on page 68, it seems very program here. I wonder why it's like that. Its first item, the first priority is given to projects that demonstrate partnership with other organisations. I was wondering if that should have been collaboration. It should prioritise environmental issues. For me, this is not a good way to go in this particular program. It's only $30,000, given the social issues that we face in Victor Harbor here amongst the youth, that there are other grants we have for environmental programs. So that here I would have been expecting to see prioritisation of social issues, social improvement. And I wondered on the fifth one, I should say, there's supposed to be priority be given to projects that have intergenerational focus. And I was wondering what was expected to be meant by that. I think I can figure out a reason, but I'd like to know what was expected out of them.
Leanne, I wonder if you can answer those questions because they're quite specific.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor Robertson. We put those areas in because that was some of the need that was had resulted from some of the work we've been doing with young people in schools already. They're not prescriptive as such, but are some ideas, I guess, or some ways that we can add some value to what that money will be used for. And our current Youth Development Officer has a brief about managing some of those other questions that you're asking for. So Council will be addressing some of the socialist issues, will be addressing some of those other things through the current work our Youth Development Officer is doing.
Thank you, Leanne. Are there any other questions in relation to? Not, I'll put it to the floor. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Leanne. There is recommendation 3 is that a panel made up of a council member, and we'll get to that if anybody would like to nominate to be the council member. Director of Community and Development, Manager of Community Wellbeing, the Youth Development Officer and a Youth Advisory Committee member be appointed to assess the applications under that Act to award grants in accordance with the guidelines. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded by Councillor Hales. Thank you very much. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Those in favour? Against? Carried, thank you. What I'll do is I'll ask interested in council position on that panel. If there's more than, then what I'll do is suspension of meeting procedures and ask the CEO to ballot to that. So would anybody like to put their hand up to be on that panel? Councillor Mann? I'd also like that panel. Anybody else interested in being on that panel? It's all right, suspend meeting procedures. I have 2/3 majority to do. Yes, yep, I'll just move item 4 first so that the CEO carry out the ballot. Someone like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconded. Motion 4, Councillor Hales. Any questions? Those in favour? Against? Do I have 2/3 of members agree to suspend meeting procedures? Thank you very much. I'll hand over to the CEO.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, yours is going to be tricky, so I might have to get you to text me your preferred candidate because I can't hand you a piece of paper. Preferred candidate?
CEO, yeah, no, I'll keep it short. It's definitely an area of passion for me, development, and this might add some benefit for council. I'm still within the young people age of 12 to 25 as outlined in the policy. So relevance, and then knowing people above and below my age group would appreciate, could add extra resources. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Mayor Jenkins?
Yes, and I'd like to nominate for this. I think there's going to be a good range of ages on that panel. We've got Daniel Weston, who's our youth officer. We've also got a youth advisory committee member that panel as well. Youth and youth issues are something that have been really important to me. I've been involved in Laneway Youth, which I'm no longer, unfortunately, involved with that, and trying to get a youth centre and greater youth development has been something that has been very important to me as mayor here, very much believing that young people are the future of Victor Harbor, and that next generation moving up to be leaders in the future. So the more we can support them, the better that certainly is.
So if you may have, Katie's just given you a piece of ballot paper, so I only need one name. So your preferred candidate, the candidates are the Mayor or Councillor Mann. So please select one, write it on the ballot paper, and then Katie will come collect it, please. And Councillor Mann, if you could text me your preferred. Thank you. With 5 votes, councillor Mann is a preferred candidate.
Well done, councillor Mann. So we'll come back into meeting procedures. Is everybody happy for that? And the recommendation is that council appoints councillor Mann as the council member representative for Youth Development Grants Program. I have someone to move that way. Thank you, councillor Henderson, and seconded councillor Schofield. Are there any questions or comments? No. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Well done. We now move to item 10.2, time limited street parking at Whalers Restaurant. The first recommendation is that council receive a note. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Schofield? And seconded by? Do either of you want to speak to the report? Does anybody want to speak to the report? Councillor Glasbrook?
Yeah, could I just ask a question? I know there's been some emails sent around about this, but if Director Hayter could explain the reasons as to why we can't have a drop-off zone out the side of the Whalers building there. I know when I spoke to the people up there, that was certainly what they spoke to me about. So I don't know if that question could be answered.
Jodie, perhaps?
Thank you, through the Mayor. It depends if you want to have a drop-off zone or a compliant disability car park. So the questions we were asked were about a compliant disability car park, which can't be achieved on council land in that area. A drop-off zone, there's already 15-minute car parking there. And if they have a crossover to their land, then they can allow their patrons onto their land. That's what the third item in this report is referring to. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think so. So what was the crossover bit? Sorry, could you just explain
So
that?
there's already a driveway crossover, sorry, through the Mayor. There's already a driveway crossover into their land that they currently have rubbish collection and deliveries for the restaurant. There is a car park in front of it, a 15-minute car park. So if there was no car park there, then patrons could use their driveway crossover to travel into their land and use it as a drop-off zone to the private land.
No, I don't. Yeah, I'm sorry. You've lost me a little bit.
Can you, sorry, do you rephrase your question?
Maybe if we get members to go to the map that's on page 81, and Jodie might be able to explain through that. I think you're looking at the blue section.
Correct, through the Mayor, the blue section. So there's 3 existing 15-minute car parks on the road, indented car parks. Sorry, 4. The second one from the top is actually a car park, but it also provides a driveway crossover to the Whalers Restaurant, where they get their rubbish collected and their drop-offs for their supplies. So if there's a car park there, it can't be used as a drop-off zone. Once you get onto their land, it is a flatter area, so it's easier for people with mobility issues to use that area. But again, that's on their land. It's not a car park on council land.
Thank you. So those blue parks are 15 minutes?
Correct.
At the moment? Okay. Because, yeah, that's, I think well, perhaps they wanted better access across council land to their property. That's what they spoke to me about. They wanted to have a drop where people could drop off people with, you know, a mobility issue, so they could get straight into the Whalers, and then those people could go off and find a car park somewhere else and come back and pick them up. That's how it was explained to me by the new owner.
One of the things that we've been talking to the new owner about, and I was at a meeting, I think Jodie was, and we also went and talked to them down at Whalers, was perhaps helping with a ramp of some sort, so that there could be a drop off down the bottom and a ramp that would be wheelchair accessible, that would go up to one of the current ramps. Unfortunately, because on the hill where that blue area is, It's too steep to actually put disabled parking there because there would be too much of a drop off at the end of the disabled parking. So you can't put disabled parking there. The only place you could put disabled parking with a ramp or with wheelchair access is down on the council land and going up onto their land where the yellow marking is. So that's one of the things that we've been looking at, which is separate to the actual changes to parking controls. One of the difficulties that they talked about in the meeting was that on busy days, their car park is actually full of people who are fishing, and there's been several occasions over breakfast where they can't get their breakfast patrons in because there's no parking down there. But if you made that parking 2-hour parking in front of the restaurant where the yellow area is, then breakfast patrons will be able to go there and have their breakfast and come away. And then if you made the parking behind there, which is a public car park in the green, if you made that 3 or 4 hour parking, then those people who are going for dinner or wanted to be at the restaurant more than 2 hours can actually park there and access the restaurant. Disability parking is something that's extra, which we're still discussing and looking at what the feasibility is. And at the moment, we're just looking at recommendations for public consultation in relation to the 2-hour and the 3-hour parking.
Can I just clarify for that? It's also Councillor Glasbrook, the consultation does include that crossover. So it actually talks about removing that car park, that second one in, and making a access so that can be a drop off in the interim for people who are disabled. It's not a classified disabled parking facility, but they could. But at the moment when people park in it, they can't get access for their deliveries. So that's in the consultation. That is incorporated in this consultation in here.
Is
Thank
that,
you.
yep.
Well, it does, although, yeah, I'm happy for it to go to consultation. I believe it's a public car park, and I think people who want to use it to go fishing should have as much right as someone who wants to go to the restaurant. That's my personal opinion, but happy to go out for consultation on it.
Councillor Robertson?
Yeah, I think the whole disability access issue to this facility, this restaurant here, at present, there's only one way to go, and that's in those little parks on no, it's not Jago Road. What is it? Franklin Parade, I think. Anyway, it's the steep bit in blue. There's only one park there that's suitable, but if it remained 15 minutes and was marked as a disabled park, I think that would help a lot, because yes, it's all very fine to talk about having a long ramp, and it would be a long ramp that went from the yellow marked area up to the restaurant, but that's like $250,000, $300,000 job. And then the getting disabled from the car parks in green at the back is that's okay to get down to the upper part of Whalers or to the tennis courts there, but then there's no way of getting down into the restaurant until there's a lift put in. That's another $250,000 job that I guess the owners of this place don't want to engage in. So the only place to put a disabled access in is on that, it's not all steep. There's one part there which is right opposite the driveway, and for the life of me, yes, I hear that, oh, you can't have a car park there because delivery trucks can come in. Well, hang on, the rubbish is only collected, one day a week, and it's for specific hours. During that day, that can be left as be clearly marked on the sign that the same with delivery of food and stuff like that in there. That the owners would have to organise with the delivery trucks that they came in at a certain time. That so it could be used for both. And I'm really wondering, one of the ways of manipulating this is that on page 78, in the background section there, it's got that, the 2-hour car park restriction, to the parking in the front of the restaurant. That's the yellow bit. That would be useful, but that's really basically around lunchtime, because if you've got, for that particular facility, parking there, by the time nightfall comes, the evening dining, the fishing people, including the ones going on charters, have already gone. And I would have thought that the restriction on parking on Jago Road Extension at the rear, that's in the green section, been far better off having a 2-hour restriction rather than 3. Means greater churn and giving more people a chance to have presumably a lunchtime, because they'll easily get 3 hours in the evening. And or there, if it's 2 hour, if it's outside on the blue bit on sorry, on the green bits at the back, there was a 2-hour limit from 8 o'clock till 4, then a 3-hour limit from 4 o'clock in the afternoon onwards. I think with just looking at the time frames and
30 seconds left.
like getting disabled access in there, for me, it's just take one of those 3 parks out that's up the hill on the on Jago Road in the blue. Make that a 15-minute disabled car park. Yes, the disabled people won't be able to park there. Have to drop their passengers off and then go away and find a park and then come back for them. Similarly, when they depart, but at least it gives you permanent access to them until a better solution. For this particular restaurant there, at some stage, someone has to bite the bullet and either put a lift in or, shell out a lot of money for a very long ramp to go from the yellow car park up into the.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are there any further comments?
Thanks. Through the Mayor, I just wanted to respond to say that this report is about time limited parking, not necessarily about the access for people with disabilities. The owners of both the business and the property were the ones that requested the 2-hour restriction and the 3-hour restriction. And they were also the ones that requested to retain their driveway access to their property and not to put a car park in front of it. So that's the report that's being presented. Obviously, the findings of that report may highlight some disability access requirements, but this is what's been recommended by both the business owners and the property owners. Thank you.
Thank you, Jodie.
If I could ask a question about that, is yeah, that's fine for access to their restaurant, but it still doesn't. It means that basically this particular place has no disabled access. I mean, I don't.
Councillor Robertson, because you are over time. So have you got a specific question?
Yeah, if all that we're doing here is time limited street parking, then when are we going to address the issue of disabled access to this place?
Through the Mayor, the owners also said that they're currently looking into providing disability access on the tennis courts, and they are looking at the feasibility of installing a lift. So that access is being looked at by the property owners and the business owners at this stage.
But this access to the tennis court doesn't get you access to the restaurant. Thank
you, Councillor Robertson. Are there any further comments in relation to receiving and noting the? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried. Thank you. The second recommendation is that Council proceed to public consultations for the changes to parking controls. Would someone, Councillor Schofield, moving that way? And Councillor Henderson seconding that? Do either of you want to speak to it? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
Just a question that commenced, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Do we always do public consultation on every car park time limits that we change? Because I believe in the past we haven't, but I may be wrong, but please stand corrected. But I know on Victoria Street with the patchwork that changed from 2 to 3, I'm not quite sure we went to public consultation on that one. So why are we going to public consultation on this?
We're not required to go to public consultation. It is just because of the area and the significant interest that we have whenever council does anything in this area, particularly around parking. Hence, we thought it was best to come to the chamber and go for consultation, but you don't have to.
Are there any further questions or commentary in relation to recommendation 2? And I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried, thank you. Is the report in relation to the delivery of customer services over the 2021-22 peak holiday period, which we've just had, and the recommendation is that council receive and note the report. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconding that, Councillor Henderson. Either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, thanks. Interesting report. And a question first to the CEO, because I didn't see it reflected here, since this is a 38-day report, because it's running from 24th of December to the end of January. Was there, did the CEO feel that it appeared to go very well? But I mean, do you think there was anything in there that needed further tweaking for next year's?
Not in particular. I was obviously pleased in regards to the results of council actually for the first time having the library services open during that Christmas New Year closure time, because we did actually get interest around that, so it's good to gauge. We also knew we had a number of issues with facilities, like maintaining facilities during the last Christmas period, and I think we addressed those because we had a lot less complaints and calls around those areas. So I just felt we have learnt from the challenges we had last Christmas, and you've seen a reduction in the number of calls coming through and how we responded.
And yeah, another, just a comment there, that I was looking at the figures on the top of page 90. This is for 38 days, particularly related to the Bluff boat ramp. The number of these are launching fees, they're not parking fees. Launching fees that were transactions, I should say. So over 38 days, we have 41 parks, I believe, trailer parks down there, and so 38 times 41 is about 1,600. So there were, and although many people go down there to park and spend the whole day, leaving their, taking their boat out for the whole day, most people only going out for a few hours at a time. So to me, it was interesting that I reckoned that roughly either half those people found a way to get down there without paying. But anyway, it was like,
so the ticketing is actually for launching, it's not for parking down there.
Yep, launching, yeah. But I figured that on the basis of what people were doing down there, that the transactions that we had, about 1,500 total transactions that for that 38-day period, that I would have been expecting more transactions. But
are there any further comments in relation to that recommendation? So I'll put it to those in favour. Against? Carried, thank you. Recommendation 12, Environment and Infrastructure, 161 Hindmarsh Road Stormwater Works. I might do that recommendation en bloc, that council receive and note the report. And the second recommendation, that council increase the capital budget by $84,000 to enable stormwater works. Road. Happy to move both of those en bloc, councillor Henderson. You and councillor Schofield seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp and then councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. There's an interesting story when you read the history of this for over 18, 19 years, and it just sort of wonders about the council's performance through that space. Because when you look at 2003, it says here that the owner was advised that the drain was to be relocated or buried would be at the owner's cost. So what's changed in 2022 that we're now going to spend $84,000 to do it? Surely the owner could do it. Is that the case? I'm wondering, is curious as to why. And plus, the other question is how come this has been not on the radar for us to fix through all those years? So what's happened with the asset management of stormwater pipes and where they're located and their upgrades and all that? So that got missed as well by the look. So, but we do have a recommendation in front of us to actually support this and change it around and have an easement so we can actually maintain the stormwater pipes. So that's great news in the end, but geez, it took a long time. But I'll support this.
Shall, I think Kathy Hayter might be able to answer your first two questions. Councillor Kemp.
So in relation to the asset itself and why in 2003 it was different to what it is now. In 2003, we didn't recognise it as our asset and we do now, so we're responsible for theirs.
Could you please clarify how do we recognise it as an asset now and it wasn't then? What's changed?
Essentially, we found it.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Did that answer your questions? Thank you. Councillor Robertson, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Will the new pipe be the same diameter as the old pipe?
Through the Mayor, yes, it will.
The old pipe, the existing pipe is basically on top of the ground almost. How far down will the new pipe be put?
Through the Mayor, it'll be 600 down, 600 mil.
600 mil down. That's the top of the pipe. It's got to be 600 mil below the surface of the ground. If we turn to page 94, at the below level aerial shot there, where this new pipe that's going to be laid from up in Seymour Lane down the length of this block of land, then come out and join another stormwater pipe on Hindmarsh Road there. Have we checked where they're joining up together? Because at present the pipe that's going through is coming through at ground level. Then I guess it dips right down into the pipe that's running along. So there'll be quite a bit of work to be done at that junction, I would imagine. So do the levels also that potentially that this, so that we are sure that the funds we've got now are able to the pipe in down a new pipe down 600 mil, and it will be able to join up with the I guess larger stormwater pipe that's on Hindmarsh Road. Be a relatively easy piece.
Thank you. Through the Mayor. Good question, councillor Robertson. You're right, we don't know what we don't know, but we have had the consultant who's been doing the stormwater master plan look at this, and they have suggested that yes, they will align, so it should be okay. But of course, once we get in there, it may not be, but at this stage, we believe it is okay and they will line up.
And so we're not sure about the condition of that TNT junction. So we might have to replace a little bit more of that Hindmarsh Road drain as well.
Through the mayor, you're correct. We might need to replace that pit.
And then what the arrangement here is, the new owner of this block is going to looking as though he's going to get 4 car parks that go into the block, out the back or down the side or whatever is going to be built there. Seymour Lane's becoming quite a place for busy with traffic. And so I was wondering how many car parks he'd be looking to have out the back. Did the development plan show that?
Might need to take that through the mayor, might need to take that one on notice. They have 4, you're right, 4 car parks at the front there. The car parking off Seymour Lane out the back is for staff, but I don't know what sort of plan in the planning application, how many total car parks.
Yeah, it's okay. So yeah, I recognise that this job needs to be done quickly. Yeah, we need to fix this. Is an old mess and maybe fix it up. And that we should get it done as soon as possible before the autumn rains come. So yeah, I mean, I'll be supporting this. I'm just very concerned to make sure that cost of this doesn't blow out, because we haven't got all the information we require.
Thank you, councillor Robertson. Does anybody else have any further questions in relation to the recommendation on block? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thank you. Item 12.2. The council for the Causeway Complex. Again, I'll do that recommendation on block. That council receive a note. The new underlease report. And the second recommendation that council supports PNS Mason as the head lessees of the Causeway to enter into a new underlease. Moved that way, councillor Schofield. And seconded by councillor Glasbrook. Do either of you have any questions? Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. What is going to be the period of lease of this shop?
Might need to take that on notice, councillor Robertson.
Yeah. And the other thing is, appreciate the opportunity that's come up and been taken by the current lessees of the Causeway Cafe to take on this new business there, but and good luck to them. But I'm just wondering, in this sort of situation here, should we be putting this out for an expression of interest? The lease of
Councillor
this?
Robertson, can I just remind you that there is a confidential aspect to this report, that it's in the confidential items?
No, it's not.
It does actually refer to the bottom 97. There's a due to commercial and confidence, a letter received from the prospective business owner providing details of the business provided to council members under separate cover. And it's actually up to the head leasee, which is Mr Mason. He's the one to undertake the lease. It's not for council to go out for expressions of interest because he is the head leasee. It just requires council's approval for him to sublease.
So that gives them a right for make a proposal, sole source.
It's his business.
Okay. Yep.
Are there any further questions in relation to that? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. 12.3, the Boating Facilities Working Group feedback, and the recommendation is the council receive and note the report. Someone like to move that way? That. Councillor Robertson. Do either of you have any questions? Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, just basically from a Chamber's point of view, Boating Facilities Working Group, what timelines we're looking at that would be looking at this type of recommendations and seeing where we can and can't achieve them? Any project plans being sort of looked at the moment?
Through the Mayor, so the advisory group can't actually provide recommendations to us, so they can provide advice to council and then council can determine what it would like to do with those.
I stand corrected. The advice that we received by the Boating Facilities Working Group is staff. Has staff done any preliminary work on timelines or project planning as to when we present this to council as to how we can move on forward on these advice?
Through the Mayor, for which ones are you referring, Councillor Kemp? Are you talking, for example, about the Eastern Boat Ramp for the Coastal Adaptation Study?
There are two sections there. There's 4 points in one area and then also 3 in another. So I'm just wondering. Is there anything planning or project scoping to bring to council for discussions?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, in that case, Councillor Kemp, I'll just run through them one at a time. So in relation to a groin where the multi-purpose boat landing facility is proposed, so you may recall that the Chamber requested that we write to the Minister to the state about the Eastern Beach boat ramp to see if the state would be prepared to start that project. We have sent the state all of our 19 previous studies and reports. The state are currently reviewing all of those reports before coming back to us with a recommendation, so we can't give you an actual timeline on that other than we are progressing that one. Moving the boat ramp from the causeway, that's obviously after an alternate one, so that is dependent on the first one. The construction of the, again, dependent on the first one, whether it goes into council's short-term plan. You may remember that council also determined that it would rather the state take on or at least collaborate with council on that. So hence we've referred that to the state and are awaiting their advice on that one. The next one's the toilets. So the Bluff toilets currently in design and will start soon. That one should be finished by June this year. That one's been through all the relevant processes with Heritage, been to the Chamber, so that one's underway. Both the Bluff boat ramp and the need to extend the floating pontoons and create a beach landing facility, those things haven't been considered by the Chamber, and there are currently no allocations in the long-term financial plan for those pieces of advice.
With permission of the Chamber, I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to also ask. I think the questions in relation to the Bluff boat ramp usage and the boating facility group suggesting feedback to the Chamber in terms of the need to extend the floating pontoon. That's something that I think would be helpful coming to the Chamber to discuss prior to the budget or as part of our budget deliberations. And so having some work done on that, as well as a short-term creation of a beach landing facility on the southern side of the breakwater for smaller boats and jet skis, looking at how much that would cost and whether there's any feasibility in that to assist. So I think that there are some things in terms of the working group advice that they have provided to us that is worth us considering as part of the budget deliberations, and not just receiving the report and then forgetting about it, because I think that's some of the frustration that I'm hearing back from members of the working group, that the report team seems to come to council and then any of the recommendations, well, they're not, as you said, they're not recommendations, but any of the advice that the group provide in relation to some of the issues that we have just seems to be forgotten. So I would certainly like to, I don't know whether the chamber agrees, have some further work done on whether we can extend the floating pontoons further to provide additional parking on the water, and that will reduce congestion in the channel, and whether or not we can have a beach landing facility on the breakwater. So I'm not sure whether or not that's something that the council would like to have further information on, to see whether or not we can progress, especially with budget deliberations coming up. Councillor Kemp.
Mayor Jenkins, just for clarification, so your question is, will this be included in the next set of capital budget deliberations?
I suppose the question was, is that what the council would like? My personal opinion is I think that we need to consider this in the budget and in the forward planning. But if we're just receiving and noting this report and it's not going anywhere, then it doesn't provide us with the ability to consider it. So whether or not somebody wants to make a motion for that to be considered as part of the budget deliberations, that can happen. Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd like to move a motion that the consideration be given in 22-23 budget deliberations on the vision of additional and a beach landing facility on the south side of the breakwater.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. If you can just keep that in mind, we have got a motion on the floor at the moment. So as soon as the recommendation to receive and note the report has been carried, then I can take that other motion without notice on board. Does anybody else have any other comments in relation to that recommendation, receiving and noting the report? Councillor Robertson, you haven't spoken to that? I think so. Yep. You seconded it, but I don't think you spoke.
I just wanted to say, Mayor, that I appreciate the work that's gone into from Jodie Robertson into this, and the extent to which the support that was given to the working group in bringing this back to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I now put that recommendation to the floor. All those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Robertson, you suggested a motion without notice in relation to bringing back to the council for discussion the need to extend the floating pontoons. Is that extending the floating pontoons or an additional floating pontoon, or extending and or the additional?
I think that's a design issue, but whatever, more pontoons would definitely help. So that the council gives consideration to, in the 22-23 budget deliberations, to providing floating pontoons and a beach landing facility on the southern side of the breakwater at the Bluff program.
Katie's just writing that up at the moment. If you'd like to look at the board just to make sure that she's got what you've wanted.
It's good. Declaration.
I might just clarify and ask Katie to put the council give consideration to extending or adding and adding floating pontoons, which provides the option of extending the current floating pontoons so that they're longer, or if possible, adding another floating pontoon if extending the other one isn't, just so that we've captured both of those. Are you happy for that, Councillor Robertson?
Yep, whatever way, it's just providing additional parking space, so.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Kemp. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Kemp?
Just basically think, I mean, this is a discussion point where we may not get up in the discussions of having this extra funding put aside, but I have a set mind of what a figure would be for our capital budget this year. So if this gets up, something else may have to drop off. So I think it's all right to have these discussions, whether this gets up or not. We'll just have the opportunity to discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Is there any further discussion from any of the other members? Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I guess what I want to add is that I think it's okay to include a discussion or budget deliberation, but I think taking into account the discussions we've already had the other night about our capital budget, and my take from that was there is a preference to reduce the amount of capital work. I know that our administration is already at the upper end in capacity, and that we can level that out a bit more. So I think that in reality, if these projects stack up against some of our other ones, I don't know whether necessarily, if there is a need for these, I don't know whether the priorities align with some of our other projects being intensive capital costs at the moment. But for the purposes of including it in those discussions, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. If there's no further discussion about that, I'll put that recommendation to the floor. Those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now come to item 12.4, the revision of the process for the Waipinga Road encroachment. The recommendation I'll do on block, once again, receiving and noting the revised process, and recommendation 2 that council undertaking a land.
So I probably should declare a conflict of interest, although this decision's already made. It's just a change in process, really. This property is my nephew's property. The fact this decision's been made.
You should still declare your interest as you did previously.
Right, I'll leave the room then.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Would somebody like to move the recommendation on block? Thank you, Councillor Robertson, and seconded by Councillor Hales. Do either of you have any questions in relation to that? Does anybody have any questions or need any clarification? Not, I'll put it to the floor. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hales. If you could ask Councillor Glasbrook to come back. Item 12.5, the Encounter Bikeway Realignment Consultation Summary. I'll do that again en bloc, that council receive and note the report. And the second recommendation is that council provide findings to all the key stakeholders till the outcome of Alexandrina Council's Encounter Bikeway consultation is available. Kathy has got an update for you. There's a line missing in the report. That's a fairly important line. So Kathy, if you don't mind, just updating that.
Thank you, Mayor. With apologies, members, I'd just like to draw your attention to page 22. I'm sorry, there is a line missing there from the Friends of Kyneton and their submission. So what is written here is correct. However, the Friends of Kyneton in their submission said they strongly support option 2, which would remove the bikeway from Seagull Avenue and relocate to the rail corridor. And they noted that the rail corridor could also be used for option 1. So I will add that in, but that line should be there, so it clearly outlines which option they support. And also to note, there is a mock-up there of a shared path, and that mock-up, the photograph that's been used in the background there is actually in Alexandrina's territory, not ours. It's a little past our border, so apologies, that is not in our area, although the shared, obviously the illustration of the shared path is what a shared path looks like. That piece of coast is actually further towards Kyneton.
Would somebody like to move that recommendation en bloc? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Robertson. Either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think that a lot of work has gone into this bikeway and get tracking on it. A question first up is that my understanding is that Alexandrina as council have done a very thorough survey of the use of the roads, potential roads for the bikeway, and the use of roads around the bikeway during the end of last year, I think. Has the Director Hayter had any chance to have a look at that?
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Robertson. Alexandrina is currently going through a process of looking at the Encounter bikeway there, and they have had traffic counters through January, I understand, but as far as we are aware, that hasn't been compiled or aggregated into any form of report yet. But I understand they are undertaking that research at the moment.
A follow-up question to that. What's your take, through the Mayor, what is your take on the sense of urgency or the commitment to this bikeway from Alexandrina's point of view?
Through the Mayor, I'm not sure that I can answer that. Funds in their long-term financial. From our perspective, we don't have any funds in our long-term financial plan until 25-26, when we have $200,000 for the Oliver's Parade section. And then 26-27, we have another 1 million allocated. So I'm not sure where Alexandrina sits in terms of its priority ranking in their long-term financial plan, but for us, we're still a few years out.
Yeah, because here what this second recommendation is says here, middle of the beginning of the second line, it says, and that no further action is taken until the outcome of Alexandrina's bikeway consultation is available. So does that look like that could happen in 2022, or is that a 2023 feeling for you? Because we need to not let the ball drop on this one much. There's things that we can do in relation to keep on going with the work on this bikeway, certain bits of it if they're not
Through the Mayor, thank you, councillor Robertson. So as far as we're aware, Alexandrina's their report is due by June. Clearly we need to work with Alexandrina specific alignment at that end. You're right, we could pursue the other end, lot 51 end and the High Marsh Road end. That certainly was a topical point through the consultation about as bikeway off road. So we could pursue that end if council chose to do something prior to it being fully resolved.
Are there any further questions in relation to this? David Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Laura. I'd like to raise the issues around the consultation process where we looked at feedback from the community. Is that report's going to Alexandrina to show what feedback under our consultation and how many people supported each of the options? Because in the report here, it doesn't actually have that information available. I'm just wondering if that consultation report or feedback on who preferred what option, because there is a petition which wasn't recognised, but I believe there was a statement made that you'll make reference to the number of people who made a point about which option they preferred, even though the petition wasn't accepted. Is that going to be included in the information going to Alexandrina Council? And the other one, you talked about lot 51. Is that still available as an option for us, or have we lost that opportunity? I know the government's in caretaker mode at the moment, but where are we sitting with lot 51? Because that is a crucial part of the realignment development. And I thought, you know, whether we go use it as a bikeway or not, I think that could have been great if we could have actually got that now, not wait until we decide what type of bikeway we're going to have, because we may lose it. And once we lost it, we'll never get it back. So I'm wondering why we haven't got that at this stage.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So the first one around the petition, yes, it is included on page 22. There is a few paragraphs there about the petition, and it does state that 1,086 people at the time of writing that were included. You may also recall that the petition started off not being specifically about those options, so we can't, like those petition signatories weren't necessarily from the beginning asked to support a particular option, so we haven't allocated them to options. Have noted particularly around the Seagull Avenue safety aspects. So that has been included as mentioned. The second point about lot 51. So yes, lot 51 is still in contention if council would like to pursue that. Crown Land and Department of Environment, or Department for Environment and Water hasn't closed off any options there. We have spoken with them and they are willing to wait for council to put recommendations to them about what we would like to do. They haven't suggested that they would give it to council, and nor have they sought council to purchase it. They are looking for what council would like to do there, and obviously there has been through this process some residents who also would not like to see that land come to council and developed in any way. So I guess for council, in thinking about lot 51, it is whether or not, if council determines at the end of the day it's going to go through that rail corridor along the bottom there, would it still want lot 51? I don't know the answer, that would be up to council. So, but I guess the thing at the moment is lot 51 is definitely not off the table.
Thank you. Are there any further questions in relation to the recommendations? If not, I'll put them to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. (13.1), we have the minutes of council, one being the City Activation and Strategic Planning Advisory Committee. The recommendation is to receive and note the report. All those in favour? Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm getting ahead of myself there. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconded by Councillor Henderson. Are there any questions? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Bluerow Regional Community Services Advisory Committee. I'm receiving and noting the minutes. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Henderson, and seconded by councillor Hales. Are there any questions in relation to those minutes? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, Mayor, I'm just, I was reading this, the minutes of this, on page 125 in the agenda there, and was really puzzled. The committee's self-assessment was that it had the right skills on the committee, and had the size and composition of the committee structure that were effective for what they're doing, and that they listen well and understand and respond to the community. But thought that it was really strange that that the question was asked, number 4 on page 125. Do we have a clear vision? And that was definitely no. Do we understand our roles and responsibilities? That was sort of half and half, mostly. And do we have an agreed strategy with priorities for achieving our vision? And that was also sort of mostly. So to me, I wanted to ask what seems to be holding this well-resourced and competent committee back from having its being able to have a clear vision of what it's doing.
But Marilyn, you indicated you'd like to answer that.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor, Councillor Robertson, in a nutshell, these answers reflect the recent review of community services and the new directions that the committee has taken with respect to that review.
Is that a response, Mayor, or is that a comment?
That was a response to your question, but I can ask Director Pathouse if he'd like to add to that.
Yeah, through the Mayor, just picking up on Councillor Henderson's comments, the service review fundamentally looked at a number of things, and bearing in mind that the service review also came out off the back of one of the key partners previously within that space having stepped away from the partnership. So the service review looked at a lot of things going forward. One of those was the need for a strategic plan for the community wellbeing space, and certainly I would read into this that that reflects the sentiment that the committee. So, and also the transition of the services towards a collective impact framework or a collective impact model. So I'd suggest that that those two items of work from the review still need a whole lot of scoping, a whole lot of development, particularly the strategy, and then that one would think would provide a firmer basis for which the committee can then operate, have a flow-on effect.
Thank you, Graham.
From the same minutes, I've been watching this. This is on page 124 for a long time. But first of all, I wanted to check the safety issue that we have in the emergency department at the hospital, which was getting pretty bad about 2 years ago. Is it gotten any better, or is it still a situation where the staff that work there, feel as though they need a lot more security than is being offered?
Which page are you referring to, Councillor Robertson?
The business arising, page 124 on the agenda. There was a letter drafted to the Minister of Health expressing safety concerns in the emergency department. letter was sent from the mayor on 2nd of September 2020,
Yep, I see that.
and
I see
so and
that.
so on.
Yep.
Is that emergency or that action still existing or not?
My understanding is that the Miss Lee, who is the one of the senior nurses at the hospital, has been invited to call on a regular basis to talk to the committee about that. She was meant to go to the November meeting and has rescheduled for later on, but she will be updating the committee in relation to that.
Because if we have a continuing problem of insecurity in the emergency department at our local hospital, then this is really a shocking indictment of the minister and his concern for what's going on from out of Adelaide, because it's been 2 years, nothing's happening, and no action's being taken. We're just trading letters. But maybe the insecurity was a flash in the pan, and now it's all over, and we don't need to worry about it anymore. But it's an item on the and it's part of the action list for this committee. So, I think it's important that it be dealt with, and I was going to suggest that if it's an ongoing issue, that we again ask the CEO perhaps to write to the Minister of Health again, although it won't do much good. They're all in caretaker mode, but
If I may, through the mayor, obviously, it was originally raised with this committee because both the advisory council that actually does oversee the South Coast District Hospital were having some challenges. There was a letter that was written. This committee is just out of oversight, so it provides an advocacy role. This committee really doesn't have any jurisdiction in regards to giving any direction. It just can advocate. And it's just wanting the matter to be left on there and given updates if and when. If we were aware of any of those ongoing issues, I'm sure they'd either come through either from council's representative who sits on the hospital committee, or they'd come directly to council. So really it's just a monitoring at this stage. I believe they have been addressed, otherwise we'd still see it as a major concern on the agenda.
Councillor Glasbrook, you're the representative on the Hospital Advisory Committee. Are you aware of any ongoing issues?
No, we have a report from Amy Lee, the Don, however you say that, every month, and she's not mentioned any issues with that. So I don't know that they have been rectified, but they certainly haven't been raised again, let's put it that way.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Are there any further questions in relation to those minutes? Not, I'd like to put the recommendation to the floor. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried, thank you. 13.3, the Southern Communities Transport Scheme Advisory Committee minutes. Move that recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconded by Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to them? Are there any questions that anybody has in relation to those minutes? In that case, then, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. 13.4, the Audit Committee minutes for the 7th of February. There's two recommendations: receiving and noting the minutes and endorsing the reviewed terms of reference as provided at attachment B. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook, and seconded by Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak? Does anybody have any questions in relation to either of those recommendations? Put them on favour. Those against? That's carried, thank you. 13.5 is the CEO Performance Review Committee minutes of the 31st of January. Someone like to move them? Thank you, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to them? Does anybody have any questions in relation to those minutes? Not, all those in favour? Those against? Thank you. 14.2 is the Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority's second court, 14. Point 14.1, subsidiary and representative reports. And the recommendation is that councillor receive the reports for February. Move that way. Thank you, councillor Robertson, and seconded by councillor Henderson. Do either of you have any questions for that? Does anybody have any questions? Those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. 14.2, Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority second quarter budget review. I'll do that recommendation en bloc. Council receiver noting the report and then council receiving and noting the second as detailed in the attachment. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Schofield and seconded by Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to the report? Recommendations? Does anybody have any questions or want to speak to the recommendations? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. 14.3. Again, I'll do that en bloc. To have a horse tram operating budget for 22-23. First recommendation is council receiving and noting the report, and the second recommendation is that council approving the draft operating budget as provided in attachment A. Someone like to move those two recommendations? Councillor Henderson moving that way and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to the recommendations? Does anybody want to speak to the recommendations or have any questions? All those in favour? Those against? It's carried, thank you. 15.1, the mayoral report. The recommendation is that council receive and note the report. Seconded by Councillor Hales. Does anybody have any questions in relation to the mayoral report? Not. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The elected member reports. Council receive and note them. Does someone want to move that way? Councillor Hales, thank you, and Councillor Robertson seconding that. Does anybody have any questions in relation to? If not, all those in favour? Against? That's carried, thank you. There are no matters of urgency. Questions on notice? There are none. Questions without notice? There are. Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, it's just a follow-on from Peter Charles's questions about credit cards. I'm just wondering if we can get some more clarity around this, because under the governance, I'm just struggling. It's impacting on my mind that how do we manage the governance of a staff member who reports to the CEO to sign off on her card? And would that staff member challenge the CEO on expenditure, which would happen if there was some abnormal transactions? So how do we come across the governance? I know there's etc., but again, it still comes back to that governance of a staff member who reports to the CEO signing off on expenditure.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Through the Mayor, the good thing with our internal control policies is it doesn't just come down to one staff member. So whilst there may be one person that would sign off on the statement and the supporting evidence, it also goes through a number of other checks as well. So giving some. The first check is to have a look at the associated documentation and the coding for those type of things and seeing if they are a reasonable expenditure of council. The processing stage also goes through another check whereby the officer that would be processing that would also be checking those job numbers for the applicable council expenditure and that there's a budget. And then there's also sample testing of all the credit card statements that start control and governance support officer as well, with the added layer of auditors that look at it as well. So if there was something on anybody's credit card that looked unusual, it would be picked up by any one of those officers who could either question that individually or as a group going through the internal control officer.
Just a supplement question for Mayor Jenkins. What would you clarify as something unusual? I mean, what would trigger to say, well, that's really not appropriate, they're spending? Would alcohol be appropriate?
Generally, no, but saying that, there are appropriate spending on alcohol whereby it may be a gift for someone who meets the criteria of council's policy around major milestones in life or when they're terminated or retire. So in general terms, we wouldn't be going out and buying a whole heap of alcohol on anybody's credit card, but we would be looking to see if there was a bottle purchased, whether there was an acceptable reason or termination of an employee that went along with that, and the commentary would be required for that. And then we that against the that goes with it to see that it had the correct amount of expenditure for that person's years of service. The other thing that a credit card may be used for alcohol is if there is an event, if there's a volunteer event, if there's a council event or a civic event. So it is possible to use credit cards for those type of expenditures, but we would be looking to make sure that there was an appropriate event or activity that was going along with that could be substantiated.
Thank you.
Councillor Hales?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I have two questions, if that's okay. In relation to election signage. And my question is, what is our regulatory response to election signage to ensure that it is erected within the rules that are there to reduce its impact on our community?
I can answer one through the Mayor. So initially, I've already written to all the candidates advising them all the requirements in regards to election signage. So they've got copies of our policy, all the policies and requirements. While we're not out there policing every single Stobie pole to ascertain that they're quite within, our officers are aware that they're up and about, and we respond to any complaints that we receive. Initially, what we'll do is contact the particular candidate that may have a sign that's not in the right spot, advise them accordingly. They're required to remove it or adjust it, put it up or down, whatever it may be. If it's a safety concern, we will remove it and we'll advise the candidate accordingly. So it's probably been the last week that our but usually we receive complaints.
Follow up on that one. So is it like when our public safety officers are out and about doing their usual business and they see a sign that doesn't meet the requirements, they act on that, or will they wait for a complaint?
No, if it's a real safety concern, they'll act on it. That is our main issue in terms of, particularly if there are safety concerns. Sometimes they're not quite slightly in the right position. And again, some should be in certain distances from intersections. Again, unless you're out there measuring them and you're actually taking real note of it, sometimes you can miss them. Usually, I can tell you right now, all those candidates are hot to trot and they're complaining about each other. So, accordingly.
Thank you. Can I continue with my second question? Another matter. My second question is in relation to housing affordability and council's role in that. In recent, it highlighted in a couple of areas. In our recent business, Victor Harbour Business Survey, we saw it listed concern in attracting labour and finding employees for our businesses, but we also saw the issue highlighted on the front page of the Times recently in relation to the increase in property values, which is showing the lack of supply in the market, both for purchase and for rental. So my question around this is, what role can council play in seeking to alleviate the challenges facing our community on affordable housing?
Through the Mayor, one of the roles council can play is through the planning framework and the policies that are put in place for planning, zonings, things like that. And at this point in time, there's a review of the Greater Adelaide Plan that's also looking at regional sub-plans. And one of the key elements in that work, and Garrock are doing a fair bit of work in that space, along with the LGA in affordable planning, affordable housing. Another key component that council is looking at in the new financial year, and I foreshadowed this the first budget workshop last week, is a review of its urban growth management strategy, essentially looking at growth, or all of those factors that are causing some of the issues and the reasons why we're seeing those on the front pages of the paper, but reviewing those sort of things, and then looking at processes that council participate in as to how to respond to that. So there's an opportunity to do it through that project as well. And we're looking at, with council support, to do the review of the urban growth management strategy as part of next year's annual business plan. Other ways would be to lobby government and participate in those reviews of plans, Greater Adelaide Plan, to make sure there's a presence, those sort of things in those plans.
Thank you, Director Pathouse. I think on that, I'll foreshadow our motion in relation to this item and approaching our government in relation to this.
Thank you. Good idea, Councillor Hales. We do now move on to motions on notice, and you have a motion on notice roundabout Wattle Drive. The first recommendation is that council receive and note motion on notice, and your report. Do someone move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconding that, Councillor Robertson. Thank you. All those in favour? Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yes, my proposed motion, and I will happily move them with the suggested motions from Council Administration at the same time. So that would be that Council Administration investigate the potential for the installation of a roundabout at the intersection of Hindmarsh Road and Wattle Drive, and that a report be brought back by the April Council meeting. Investigations to include, but not be limited to, the following: speaking with the Department of Infrastructure and Transport about their appetite for such improvements and whether they would grant in principle agreement or approval for the upgrades, what budget requirements there would be for the upgrade works and potential funding contributors, and 3, basic analysis of the impact this would have on surrounding streets, with the addition of the administration's recommended proposals of that council endorse a traffic study to be undertaken on the impact of a roundabout at the intersection of Wattle Drive and Hindmarsh Road, and that the outcomes of the traffic study be presented back to council such that consideration can be given to undertaking public consultation.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Certainly. I said most of it within my commentary provided with the motion for the agenda. It's about a long-standing infrastructure issue that Victor Harbour has had for a long time. You speak in McCracken, especially on the Victor Harbour side of McCracken, about how they turn out of that residential area, and especially trying to turn towards Victor Harbour. And they will all say that it is an issue, especially in the mornings and afternoons, that while we're only Victor Harbour, it's kind of our peak traffic, school, work motions, as well as with a lot of residents claiming that they just turn left, go up to the roundabout, or go up to Hayward Court and do a U-E there and turn left back onto Hindmarsh Road. So it's a long-standing issue. There's a lot of residents that I've been talking to that absolutely would support this type of idea. And so I think it's wise for us to investigate it and see where the investigations take us, conclusion into the following financial year's budget.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Did you want to speak to it? I have a question in relation to that, and perhaps Director Pathouse may be able to answer it. I know that the G'day Group have got considerable plans for McCracken, and part of their development application was around traffic management for that area. Was there anything that the G'day Group put into that actually addressed the traffic entering McCracken Drive from Hindmarsh?
So that was my motion last council meeting. This is Wattle Drives. This is the other end of McCracken.
That's the other end.
So this is the bottom, the riverside of McCracken.
Okay.
Yep.
G'day Group got anything on that? That's Riverside?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, I don't know the detail of the, they'll have a traffic plan, a traffic analysis or assessment as part of the application documentation, the DA application documentation, but I'm not sure of the detail of that plan. The staff looking at that as part of the technical assessment, along with the engineering assessment. And its presentation to the council assessment panel is imminent, actually. It will be covered, and they would have to, I think that the main focus of their application is access via McCracken Drive. And as Councillor Hales points out, that's sort of the other end of the McCracken stretch, if you like. But certainly part of it does look at the external, the parts of the traffic requirements, or the assessment reports need to look at the externalities of that as well. If there is any creep that would go through some of the back streets into other intersections. But I'm not sure of the exact detail.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or any commentary in relation to the motion? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Now, I had occasion 2 or 3 months ago to probably speak to a lot of the similar number of people about the access turning right from out of McCracken to come into Victor, and how dangerous it was. I think this is a great motion on notice, fully support it. My understanding coming back to it was that actually the Department of Transport has already done quite some thinking about this roundabout. And I think that everyone concludes that Wattle Drive is the entry point where the roundabout should be, basically close to the bridge at the bottom of the hill. But so it's a really important piece of roadwork, and a roundabout is exactly the sort of facility we need there, not traffic lights.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yes, it's an interesting subject, isn't it? Because it has been a problem for years. There's a number of roads coming out of McCracken onto Hindmarsh Road, but I'm just wondering whether this is a little bit narrow the scope, because there are other solutions which DIT can look at, and to provide some type of other solutions with a roundabout as well. I do support this, don't get me wrong, but I think there are safe haven zones you can create, like your right-hand turns. You can have a coming out of a street, doing a right-hand turn and sit in the middle of the road in a safe haven, and when the traffic's clear, they can do that. It's all line marking to make those zones, so whether that's an opportunity that DIT could look at as well. But the only concerns I would have with the roundabout, and I guess it doesn't matter where you put it, is that it will be a rat run for all commuters to come out of Wattle Drive, you know, and trying to get back in through the various side streets and back alley streets and things like that. So I think that is a problem, but again, it's like Burke Street here. I suppose it's a rat run too, but the roundabout has resolved a lot of that rat run aspect. But I think, you know, it is a good motion. I think it's a long time coming. Hope DIT gets on board, but hope that they come up with some other solutions, other sections of Hindmarsh Road to help alleviate the congestion that may come around Wattle Drive. And I know it's in the agenda somewhere else at a later stage of looking at a parcel of land we have up on Adelaide Road, which could be another exit and entrance point out of McCracken as well to alleviate congestion. But that's for another discussion. But no, well done, Nick. Oh, now one question I do have. To get support for this, as we've got an election, have you actually contacted any of the candidates and the sitting member to see if they will support this if they get into power?
I personally haven't contacted any of them, but would happily add a part of the motion that says that we should.
Would you like to add that?
Sure. We'll add, give me a moment while Councillor Glasbrook talks to this to work out the wording.
Sure. Councillor Glasbrook.
Thank you. Yeah, well, this certainly is an issue. There's no doubt about that. I suppose for me, I'm not so sure that we should be saying, let's put a roundabout there. I think we should be saying to the department and to this council, let's get together and work out how to solve the problem. I'm not 100% sure that roundabouts solve all of the problems. I think they create some problems as well. I think, as Councillor Kemp mentioned, we're looking at this a little bit narrow. The whole road is an issue from, well, just about from Murrumbera Turnoff, really, almost now, all the way down to, Victoria Street. Roundabout is an issue that needs to be addressed. It's only going to get worse. It's been significantly worse recently with the COVID and whatever else, and whether that eases over the next few years, who knows. But so, to me, I think we probably shouldn't have the word roundabout in there. I think we should just say, can we work together with the department and try and work out this problem rather than try and suggest the answer. That's my opinion. I certainly wouldn't be writing to any of the ministers saying, how about supporting this idea? We're only investigating it. The last thing I want to do is have someone raise that and say, oh, I'm going to put a roundabout in. That's my pledge for which was what happened at the last one. And I'm not sure that, even the one on Crozier Road, I'm not 100% sure that's really solved the problems, to be honest. So anyway, that's my opinion. I probably won't vote for it. I understand that there's a problem there and we should fix it, but I don't know that this is the exact way that we should be doing it. We should work with the department and look at other options rather than, I know the recommendation does look at some of those things as well, but that's only my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the views of fellow elected members, especially I think Glasbrook raises some good Councillor Kemp around the scope. However, I think that the scope as it's put in the recommendation is okay, and I'd be supportive of that. I think that I definitely appreciate the sentiment of what they're saying and what they're trying to achieve, but I think from my experience with projects such as this and other local government projects is that when we make that scope too big and try and solve too many problems, we get big delays and little outcomes for our community. I think there's a lot to do with our road networks that need to be discussed and need to be looked at, and we could list several sites that have issues, and this is definitely one that is historical and that the community have known about and been frustrated with for a long time. And I think that having specifically looking at this one issue in this instance is a good outcome and is putting forward views of the community and achieving something for our people. I think definitely appreciate the sentiment, but I think proceeding on this basis is a good outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Hales, did you want to add anything else to your motion? If Councillor Henderson agrees with it?
On thought, no, I feel as though the CEO can write to any elected MP in relation to what the council is doing at any given point in time, and so therefore I'm happy with the motion as it is. Any MP that is elected to represent this area would acknowledge that it's a concern of residents and I'm sure seek to support it.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other comments? Councillor Hales, do you want to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I certainly hear the concerns raised by Councillor Glasbrook and Councillor Kemp in relation to the scope of it. But as Councillor Mann so wisely pointed out, sometimes we get a bit too bogged down in looking at all the possible options. The motion before us certainly does allow scope for the department to come back and say, well, have you thought about this or this or this? So it certainly doesn't cut that off from being a possibility. It's just putting forward an idea that can act as that starting point and that catalyst for the wider discussion if they want to take it there. If not, if it just stays as a roundabout, I think it would be a marvellous solution for the residents of that area. I, for one, was not a big fan of the idea of the Crozier Road roundabout. In fact, I thought it would be a nightmare. I would definitely say I've been proven wrong in that regard. That roundabout, I think, has actually prevented a lot of hairy moments. And while people still do probably take the roundabout a bit too much speed or don't indicate properly, what could have ended up as an accident is now just people moving poorly around a roundabout. I certainly know that I go up the Albert Place side of that roundabout, coming out from Bedgout and Smugglers Inn side. I definitely take that road as an option to get onto the main road far more often now than before it was there. So I'm proposing this as a good solution. I'd encourage elected members to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. I'll put that recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried, thank you. It is 8:10, so we will have a little break before we continue. If we can be back here at 8:25, so that we can continue, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, welcome back. We are up to number 20, motions without notice. And I understand that Councillor Robertson has got a motion without notice in relation to the development plan. Now, in terms of motions without notice, I usually only accept them if there isn't a budget attached to them. This one here, and I've also got one, and I think Councillor Hales may have one. I don't think any of them have got budgets attached to them. So I'm happy to let them all go. Councillor Robertson, would you like to speak to your motion without notice? Katie has typed it up for you on the wall, but you might like to speak to it before we ask for a seconder.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The motion without notice is the administration to investigate the budget for and liaising with our Reconciliation Action Plan group to be printing at least 10 high-quality outdoor-ready copies of the Uluru Statement for placement in reserves and on buildings where there is significant foot traffic and in locations suitable for contemplation, and report the findings to the March council meeting. As you all probably know, the Uluru Statement was formulated in 2017 and had a very short life, really, in the sense that no action was taken on it. Federal government didn't want to move on it at the time, and it died well, it went into hibernation pretty quickly, and not many people have actually read it. In my original motion here, I had actually a copy of it. It's only 1 page long, quite a succinct document, but it's at the heart of the whole reconciliation process, practically speaking. And I thought that something that we were planning for some time in relation to the arrangements for the Newland Church is to have it outside the church, put up on a proper pole, so it can be seen, people can pass by and look at it. And I thought that it would be great to have it placed around the city in places where we have him, where people are gathering, people who gather there for a great view, like Kleinings Hill, or go out to contemplate things in some of our parks and gardens. And I think there'd be quite a bit of interest from other groups around, like Rotary Club and Zontra and others, to have one of these and put them up on their buildings. So it was my fairly simple proposition that council organises the by buying in bulk would be getting a good price, and other people would buy from them. And it's just very simply, it's just a sign that would be about 2 metres by a metre, or 1.80 metre by a metre, and would be in reasonably large font, and something that people could read, because I don't think it's for it to be moving on and to be part of the conversation on our Reconciliation Action Plan. Then people ought to have not just read the document but thought about it. But one way of doing that was to get it around places that would send a message to that our city was one that really believed in promoting that statement as a basis for reconciliation.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do I have a seconder for your motion? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do you want to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I support this because I think it's a good opportunity to demonstrate the reconciliation process, and by recognising, and it's interesting on the statements that will be printed. So I think it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Are there any comments or questions in relation to this? If not, I'll put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That is unanimously carried. I also have a motion without notice. That council administration investigate the placing of a zebra crossing or a pedestrian crossing on the Flinders Parade Esplanade area by the Causeway Cafe, and another crossing on the Esplanade opposite the beachside markets, and the report be brought back to the April council meeting for consideration. The investigations to include, but not limited to, liaising with Deputy to assess their appetite for such a crossing or crossings, ascertaining the budget required to place a zebra or alternative crossing opposite the causeway and also separately opposite Soldiers Memorial Gardens, and potential funding contribution from the state government for one or both crossings. The reason that I'm bringing this motion to council is that that area on the, I think it's the Esplanade, is some of the busiest area in our city. It's a focus point of tourism and also children. We've had the playground, which is extremely popular. Opposite the George Fisher Playground is coach parking and bus parking, and we often have school children coming down from their mobs, church groups, other groups, groups of senior citizens. There's Gilda's Amusements and the Fun Fair on the other side. There's the horse-drawn tram, the causeway, and soon to be in the Visitors Information Centre. There's the major causeway car park itself, and next to that, the beachside market. So all the way strip is extremely. We have people looking for parks. We have people that are looking at the amusement area and not necessarily looking at the road. And it's interesting, since I placed on social media that I thought that this was a problem, the number of comments that I've got and the number of people who have approached me when I've been in that area that have commented on the near misses that they have actually seen and the need for a causeway there. My understanding is from a ex-elected member some 8 years ago, David Hall, some of you might know, commented that there was a push back then to put a zebra crossing down there, but Deputy were a bit reluctant. I think that it's time to revisit that area because it is such a busy area. With Warland Reserve, as you know, we have community events on Warland Reserve. We had the Fringe Festival there yesterday. Place was chock-a-block full of families. We've got the Classic Car Club having in a couple of weeks a big parade in the classic cars. We've got our major shopping precinct, pubs and cafes and retail, and we're trying to funnel people down the main street towards the causeway, but there are no pedestrian crossings for them to cross that busy intersection, that busy road. And so I think that we really need to have it done. And there's a long history of the community wanting such a crossing. So this motion on notice is for administration to do the investigations, to bring back how much it's going to cost, what the options are, if Deputy doesn't want to do it, what the reasons for that are, so that we actually have a better understanding and can communicate that to our community, because our community is saying that they really want this. So if somebody would like to second that, Councillor Hales, thank you. We can do that. Would you like to speak to it being a seconder, Councillor Hales?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yeah, I totally second everything that you've said in relation to this. I think anything that makes Victor Harbor a more walkable and pedestrian friendly town is a good thing, especially given the nature of this particular area. There is a lot of cross traffic across that road and lots of people crossing it all throughout probably a 200-metre stretch, and not really, I guess, because there is no formalised crossing, they just cross wherever's convenient. With the construction and completion of the new causeway as well, this will only further increase the pedestrian movements and traffic throughout this area. The new causeway itself is more pedestrian friendly. It's a flatter surface, there's less trip hazards, which means that those that are less mobile, the mums with prams, the elderly with walkers or wheelchairs, can more easily access it. But a pedestrian crossing across this road will also help those people to cross this road, which sometimes, especially on the corner, people come through at a speed that isn't quite appropriate for the area, as well as people coming out in between parked cars is always dangerous. So I totally support this motion and its intent.
Thank you. Are there any comments from any other elected members? Councillor Schofield.
Yes, look, I support this 100%. What I find that because of the paving on the road, most people think it is a crossing anyway, and they just wander out, they don't even look. And I've also witnessed some very close calls with some of our staff, but also my husband and other pedestrians in that field, in particular young children. My car tells me that if I go over 10 Ks, I'm exceeding the speed limit. I don't know where that's come from because there's no signs actually telling me that.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Are there any further comments? I don't think I've got anything to add as the mover. I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? Carried. Thank you. Are there any other motions without? Councillor Hales.
As foreshadowed earlier, I do have a motion in relation to housing affordability. As my question was probing in relation to what council can do, this is an area that is, while the development side of it's governed by us in part, a lot of it is controlled at other levels of government. And therefore, I would like to put the motion that, sorry, I'll bring my motion up. Physical copy. You have a
If it was from the preamble you gave me earlier, was it that the CEO right to both local, state and federal members and candidates regarding the issue of housing, both to ask what they and their level of government is doing and seek their support in any action to address the matter?
yes.
In putting that, Councillor Hales, that you are aware of the housing forum on Wednesday?
Yes.
That their local candidates are speaking at?
Absolutely. Which is for our local candidates that choose to attend the housing forum on that matter, whether they do or don't attend. But it is also important for our organisation, especially if we're going to look at reviewing our urban growth management strategy, and also what we can in this space have written statements in relation to what our local representatives are doing in this space, as well as these levels of government can and are doing. So the motion is simply that we write to them and we ask for their knowledge in relation to these matters, as well as ask them to partner with us in dealing with the issue in the future.
While Katie's writing that, I'll just, those elected members who aren't aware, they're in the Gospel Centre on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. There will be a housing forum, and all of the candidates, actually, I think our sitting member, David Basham, has an apology and has a written statement, but all the other candidates are present and will be talking about housing affordability and homelessness in the region. So if you're able to go, it's a great opportunity to find out what the different parties are doing to assist in this area. Is that what your motion is, what that Katie's written down?
Correct. I would just probably change on the bottom line, the first is to an R. Yeah.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. I know that this is something that's very close to your heart as well. Do you want to speak to the motion?
Yes, just to say that it is something very close to my heart. I felt quite passionate about this for quite a long time, and we do need to do something about the housing crisis situation. And I will not only be attending the forum, I'll be the MC at that forum on Wednesday afternoon.
Well done. Done. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they'd like to say in relation to the motion? Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, two related issues to that, which I'd like to get the opinion of Director Pathouse on it through the chair, and that is, you know, the extent to which we in local government can address this issue by way of what happens in terms of housing design and housing development design, because there's a lot of things going on, not only elsewhere in Australia, but also overseas, where it seems quite a few cities have had quite a lot of success in terms of just through innovative design of being able to lower the cost of housing. And then, of course, a parallel issue to this is, of course, public transport. And,
Councillor Robertson, I'm sorry, both of those are really important issues, and I can understand you wanting to take them further. But if we can keep it on the specific motion in relation to writing to the candidates regarding those issues that Councillor Howells has put up, perhaps afterwards we can talk about homelessness if we've got time. Has anybody else got any questions or any comment in relation to the motion? Councillor Mann?
Mayor Jenkins, yeah, no, I think it's an incredibly important issue, and I thank Councillor Hales for bringing it up and pushing for this. I think something he's already highlighted as well tonight, which I found quite interesting, was out of that business survey around the amount of our local businesses who are saying that housing affordability is a massive barrier for them in terms of hiring and finding trades and young people to work for them. And I think housing and affordable housing is an issue that I think consistently local government is told that it's not within our wheelhouse, it's not for us to worry about. But I think what we're seeing currently is I think state and federal government's not doing enough around it. And I think if we really want to protect our local community and sort of create Victor as a place for young people to stay and live, I think this is a very important motion, and I think it's important that we do these investigations and then that we start these conversations and keep the other levels of government accountable around what they say their responsibilities are around this. So yeah, I'm very happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. And I agree. I mean, one of the jobs of local government is to advocate. And I think that motion is an advocate for people in our community in relation to affordable housing. Councillor Hales, do you want to close the debate? Have you got anything further to say?
Yeah, just in closing and speaking to a couple of the other members' commentary on this, I once again couldn't agree more with Councillor Robertson in relation to development controls and what the state governments over many governments have done to local government's ability to decide what gets built in a local area. And I think now is as good a time as any for anyone who has an issue with the types of developments that get approved to talk to their state MP or their prospective state MPs about what they're going to do around this issue. Are they going to further decrease local government's ability to control development, or are they going to keep development as a carte blanche across the state policy setting that actually has really horrible outcomes for local communities? But my motion is in relation to housing affordability, which is probably one of the outcomes of this approach to policy around development. And I just, want to thank other elected members for their support in relation to this. It's absolutely us taking that advocacy role. But also around what Councillor Mann said, it's something that we need to think about, possibly because of state and federal policy settings, in a more creative way if we truly want to see change in the area. And things like the review of the urban growth management strategy and the like provide the options and the space to have those creative thoughts.
Thank you, councillor Hales. I now put the recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. We now move to item 21, which is the first of our confidential items. And the first recommendation is that we move into confidence, and I will take that recommendation as read. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, councillor Henderson. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Schofield. Is there any discussion in relation to moving into confidence? I'll put that to the floor. Councillor Robertson?
On the first one here, on the business of justifying the confidentiality of this item here, that it says here that the applicants for the individual member position for the audit committee may lead to the possibility of court action. And I thought, wow, how did we come to that conclusion?
Kelly?
Well, I can answer that. So it's to do with personal information and an individual, and if you're seen publicly expressing that around an individual's personal information, they could take action against council. So it's a protection of council when you're dealing with personal matters about individuals.
Any further questions in relation to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, gallery. And thank you for those also listening online. Sorry. And thank you to the Times.